Today we're going to talk about 10 ideas from the book Letters from a Stoic that will make you wiser. Learning from this book will help us understand the Stoic ideas that will make our lives better. My name is Bolcha Dalal, and this is Wiser Thinking. Before we jump into the 10 ideas, let's quickly just review who is Seneca. Seneca was a Roman Stoic philosopher who lived from 4 BC to 65 AD. Seneca was a wealthy Roman, but at the same time, he still loved to live the Stoic philosophy. And in this book, Letters from a Stoic, these are Seneca's letters to a friend. And throughout the letters, you get a bunch of Stoic ideas and philosophies that helps you to live life in a much better and resilient manner. Now, on to the first idea from Letters from a Stoic. Cease to hope, he says, and you will cease to fear. So what Seneca was trying to say is basically that hope and fear are always together. So whenever you're hoping, you also have fear. And whenever you have fear, you also have hope. Imagine a stick where on one end there's hope, and on the other end it's fear. And when you pick up one end, the other end always comes up with it. And to Seneca, hope and fear belong to a mind in anxiety, where the mind was always projecting towards the future and never adapting itself to the present. I think we've all had examples where we'd be hoping for something and at the same time, we'd have the fear of not achieving it. A personal example is when I used to have test anxiety. I would be hoping to get an A on an exam, but at the same time, I was scared to death that I wouldn't get that A. And that hope of getting the A and the fear of not getting that A was always together. Instead of adapting my mind towards the test and focusing on getting the correct answers in the moment, I was making mistakes due to the fear of potentially failing. After reading Letters from a Stoic and noticing how hope and fear were always together, that helped immensely with my test anxiety. Because instead of hoping to get a mark, I would just focus in the present moment of trying to do my best in the exam. And ever since I established that philosophy of never hoping to get a mark, I've done immensely well on my exams. And this idea of hope and future isn't only restricted to the Stoics. I remember reading something from Albert Camus where he said the future doesn't exist. That's just another way of saying staying in the present moment and not worrying about tomorrow or next week, because that's all in the future. Idea number 2. The wise man will still consider what is valuable in life to be something wholly confined to his inner self. To further this idea, I'm going to tell you the story about Stilbo. Stilbo city was sacked by this known city sacker. And Stilbo lost his wife, his children, his home, and all his possessions. And when the city sacker asked him if he has lost anything, Stilbo said he lost nothing. He said all his valuables are with him. And this made the city sacker realize if he even had a victory at all. Now, this may seem corny to some or cheesy, but let's really get down to the main points. Stilbo lost everything, yet he said he lost nothing. And what he meant by that is he still had his good and enlightened character with him. Everything that he needed was within him. And for him, this is his boundary of happiness. Now, I can't say that if I lost my loved ones or lost everything in my life, I would be as stoic as Stilbo. But let's really focus that everything that he needed to be happy was within him. So the next time you're going through a rough patch in life, just remember not to bound your happiness to anything external to you. Before we go into idea 3, I'm going to tell you what Seneca said about Stilbo. He said, he too carries his valuables intact through cities burnt to ashes, for he is contented with himself. This is the line he draws as a boundary for his happiness. Idea number 3. If you shape your life according to nature, you will never be poor. If according to people's opinions, you will never be rich. If you care a lot about people's opinions about you, you'll never ever be satisfied. This is similar to idea 2 where, again, you don't want your happiness to be attached to anything external to you. And in this case, these opinions from people would be external. As long as your opinion about yourself is the most valued, you'll never feel poor. But if you're always chasing people's compliments or validation, you'll always feel empty. For example, you don't see professional athletes obsessing over their critics' opinions because they know to value their own opinion and their coach's opinion. The critics aren't there to help them get them better. The critics are there just to get clicks and views from their audience. So if professional athletes were to listen to them intently, then their self-confidence would deteriorate significantly. So if you're listening to people hating on you or giving, negative opinions about you, you'll never ever feel happy about yourself. So always remember that your happiness is confined within yourself. I have a very close friend who doesn't care what anybody thinks about him. And because of that, he was able to live his life much easier and he was able to do things that he wanted because he only cared about his opinion. And from all the people I know, he's one of the happiest individuals I've ever met. So when you stop chasing people's opinions and validation, your life will be much more liberating because that's when you start valuing yourself. Idea number 4. It is in times of security that the spirit should be preparing itself to deal with difficult times. While fortune is bestowing favors on it, then is the time for it to be strengthened against her rebuffs. This idea became very important in my life because it taught me to prepare for any worst case scenarios. Even if times are good, I always like to stay prepared for anything, whether that's being financially responsible with my paychecks, taking the bus instead of driving, or even walking instead of taking the bus, or walking in the cold instead of waiting for an Uber. There's a variety of ways where I try to take the difficult part just to prepare me if for whatever reason I had to take that certain route. I do a wide variety of things that are annoying and difficult. I don't do this to punish myself, but more to really help increase my mental toughness. Because if anything were to happen where I would have to take the difficult route or do difficult things, at least I have some practice from my past. Instead of it coming as a shock, it will be a little more familiar. A comparable example are soldiers. Because during peace, they have to be practicing and being prepared if war is to ever break out. If they were to be lazy and not be diligent with their practice, then when war were to break out, they would be ill prepared. So just like a soldier, start preparing yourself. You never know what's gonna come, but if you can increase your mental toughness and have some familiarity with the difficulties in life, then if they're to come, they're not gonna come as a shock or be as difficult for you. And another interesting point from this idea that Seneca writes is this. If you want a man to keep his head when the crisis comes, you must give him some training before it comes. Now on to idea number 5. A consciousness of wrongdoing is the first step to salvation. Sometimes when you're going through life, you don't realize all the bad habits you have. And because of that, after many years of those bad habits being cemented, it becomes very hard to break it. But if you're able to sit down and reflect on your life and your habits, it's easy to go through life without doing any real self-reflection. And when you don't do any self-reflection, you don't see any of your bad habits or errors. And with that, it's really hard to get on the path of, getting the right habits in your life or making some good changes in your life if you don't even know what you're doing wrong? And this idea is quite interesting because Charles Munger has a similar philosophy in his life where he makes sure to do a lot of backward thinking. Charles Munger loves to do backward thinking when he conducts his business. Say if there's any errors that he makes, he likes to ask himself a few questions, aka self-reflection, to really understand what he did wrong and how he can do better. Some of those questions that he asks himself are: what were the mistakes? Why did they happen? What are the major risk factors? How do specific errors evolve? What factors contribute? And with those questions and many other methods, Charles Munger is able to reduce a lot of the silly errors or silly mistakes that people make whenever they're investing or conducting some type of business. So before you go to sleep, do some self-reflection and just see what type of bad habits you have in place or what errors you made in the day, and then try to see how you can A, break those bad habits, and B, prevent similar errors happening in your life. And if you were to do this consistently, you would be better off than most people because you would be learning from your mistakes and evolving and growing as a person. For me, one bad habit that I used to have is that I tended to be a little neurotic or a little sensitive. So whenever someone said a mean joke to me or just made a comment, I would just take it so personal and I would just end up hating that person or just resenting that individual. And for the longest time, I didn't think anything was wrong with that. But when I started doing self-reflecting and saying, why do I let those people's comments bother me? Why do I make them personal? And seeing that, again, my happiness was confined within myself, I was able to see my mistakes and correct it. And by consistently reiterating that my happiness is within myself, my opinions matter to me the most, I was able to eradicate that neurotic behavior of mine. Because of my self-reflection, I was able to realize my mistakes and I was able to correct them. And again, I was able to grow from it. So if I can do it, you can definitely do it too. Idea number 6. No one can lead a happy life if he thinks only of himself and turns everything to his own purposes. You should live for the other person if you wish to live for yourself. This idea isn't special because it's Stoic. It's special because in every type of philosophy and religion, you find this idea. Not to just live for yourself, but to live for others is where you really get value and happiness as well. A prime example is Mother Teresa. She truly did live for others, and because of that, you were able to see the value she provided to people, the help, and the recognition of her work. Booker T. Washington has an excellent quote that encompasses this idea. I began learning long ago that those who are happiest are those who do the most for others. Whenever you donate to charity, don't you feel a little good about yourself? Whenever you volunteer time for, say, helping a friend move or helping a fundraiser, don't you feel good about yourself knowing that you're providing value and you're actually helping someone in your life? When you live with this philosophy, you can't help but feel good and happy because you have a place in this world where you're trying to make it better. And if you were to only think about yourself and just be selfish, you can't help but be miserable because you'll never think that you have enough. But when you're sharing your time or sharing your money, you're providing a positive impact in your community and in some sense, the world. And another interesting point, you can find in almost all religions this idea of helping others. The one that I'm familiar with is what you wish for yourself, wish for others. And when you start embodying that philosophy, you're really gonna see the value of life and the positive impact that you can provide. Now, idea 7. A man is unhappy as he has convinced himself he is. I think we're all guilty when it comes to this. I'm sure you have said, F my life before, or thinking your life was over because of something. Remember, when you're unhappy, it's because you're choosing to be. Instead of looking at the positive side or the blessings that you have, You're instead focusing the negatives or the difficulties that you're encountering. Whenever I got a bad mark in school, I thought my life was over. I thought I couldn't get into university. I thought that my parents would disown me. And that was all my own doing. It's because I thought in that manner. And as a result, it was my fault why I was unhappy if I got a bad mark. Instead of focusing, what did I do wrong? What can I do better? I was just focusing on the negative. And a little life hack is, if you say you're in a bad mood or feeling unhappy, force yourself to smile. That's been proven that if you just force yourself to smile, that you just tend to feel better about yourself. I remember reading that in the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And if you don't believe me, the next time you're in a lousy mood, just try forcing yourself to smile and see what it entails. Now, on to idea number 8. Prove. And an easy task it is, that so-called pleasures, when they go beyond a certain limit, are but punishments. When you're living life, you always want to remember balance, especially with pleasures. And in terms of pleasure, that could be Netflix, junk food, video games, whatever. You always want to remember that you want to keep them within limits. Because if you have no limits on it, they tend to ruin you. For example, if you just binge watch Netflix, you're wasting away all your prime time. Or if you're consistently eating junk food, you're depriving your body of nutrition, which has a lot of severe consequences in the short term and long term. And the same thing with video games like Netflix. You're wasting away your prime time. It's okay to do all these things within limits, but if you go into them unlimited, you're just wasting your time. And with that, you're gonna have regrets over your life. So maybe after a hard day's work, maybe you can watch one episode on Netflix, or maybe have that snack or whatever. But just be conscious of how much of it you're really doing when it comes to pleasures. One of my past guilty pleasures was Call of Duty. I used to be way too addicted to that game where I wouldn't eat properly because of it, or I wouldn't get the necessary exercise because of it. So when you get the chance and when you start doing that self-reflection, see which pleasures that are out of control and harming you. Now, idea number 9. One has to accept life on the same terms as the public baths or crowds or travel. Things will get thrown at you and things will hit you. Life's no soft affair. It's a long road you've started on. You can't but expect to have slips and knocks and falls and get tired and openly wish, a lie, for death. At one place you will part from a companion, at another bury one, and be afraid of one at another. These are the kind of things you'll come up against all along this rugged journey. What this quote really encompasses is, life isn't easy. So if you're thinking that things aren't fair in your life, I hate to break it to you, but that's the way for almost everybody on earth. However, the sooner you accept this idea that you will get tired, you will fail, you will fall, but if you keep getting back up and being resilient, you'll enjoy and value your life much more. Instead of wishing how your life should be, just accept what comes and then do your very best to change it and make it better. I've met way too many people that were unhappy with their current state because they were dealing with things that almost everybody deals with, but at the same time they felt like they're the only ones who ever had those problems. They never think that anybody else can have similar problems like financials, marital problems, relationship problems, family problems. All these problems and more touch everyone's lives. And yet those very same people tend to neglect the other perspectives. I have this coin. I got it from the Daily Stoic website and it says, Amor Fati. And on the back of the coin it says this, not merely to bear what is necessary, but love it. Yes, life will have its challenges, but it's because of those challenges you'll be able to grow and mature as an individual. So instead of getting pouty about things that everyone goes through, accept it, deal with it, and grow from it and learn. And I carry this coin whenever I'm going to do something difficult or going through a rough patch in life. This is just like a tangible item just to remind me that love my fate, regardless of what happens. And finally, idea number 10. The process of becoming a good man is an art. To me, this idea is the most important one that I got from Letters from a Stoic, because it showed me that building the proper mental toughness, building good habits, reviewing my mistakes, learning from my mistakes, all these great things that you do to become a good person takes time. And hence, it's an art. You can't just whip it out and become a great individual after reading one book or after 1 week of implementing great habits. When you're being consistently conscious of your life, making sure you're making the right choices, making sure you're implementing good habits, making sure that you're minimizing your errors in life, that in itself is an art. So that whenever you're dealing with people or interacting with people and they're saying, wow, so-and-so is actually a very interesting person or very empathetic or whatever, deep down you know that it took time to become that individual. I know many times in the video I said about growing and learning as an individual, and yet when you're growing and learning, that itself is an art because it takes time. It takes time to perfect. And since life is a journey, enjoy the process. And hopefully after, I don't know, however many years, you're somewhat satisfied or even fully satisfied with what you've become. Deep down, you knew that was an art, that it took time, it was a process. And I'm sure with all these 10 ideas, and hopefully reading the book you'll get more ideas as well, you'll start the process of becoming a good man or a woman. Alright guys, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. In the coming months, I'll produce a lot more book review videos. But until then, please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. And remember guys, let's get wiser.